This video is brought to you by MagicJank.com, the spiciest cards for your sauciest decks. Buy and sell Magic the Gathering products and gear today on MagicJank.com. What is up, Janksters? It's your boy Graham, also known as HamHawks42 on the internet, and today we are continuing our set reviews for The Brothers War. What we are doing is we're taking a look at each individual color and ranking, well, not really ranking, we are discussing each card in the context of Constructed. If you are going to be brewing in Constructed, especially in Standard, then this set review is for you. And today we are going to be looking at blue cards. We already did one yesterday on white cards, so please take a look at that if you haven't already. There will be a link in the description, and as well as probably in one of the cards if you haven't already seen that in any event. And we're going to be doing black tomorrow and kind of moving down the line until we cover every single color, as well as the colorless and lands, or multicolor, of course. In any event, so the reason that it's broken up this way, a lot of other content creators will notice will just launch one set review and it'll just be what it is, which is great. I have mad respect for people who can do that. But I'm a talker, and when I get talking about Magic cards, it's going to take a while, and I know that, which is why I've broken it down so I can give each card the time it deserves. So yeah, so with that, we're going to be jumping into the Brothers War blue set review as it relates to constructed deck brewing. So let's see what we got. First up, we have Air Marshal. This is a human soldier, 2/1 for 1 in a blue with pay 3. Target soldier gains flying until end of turn. On the one hand, I can appreciate the idea of this card because you can use Power Stone mana to actually activate it, which is pretty cool. So if you happen to have Power Stones lying around, great. However, I can't imagine a constructed deck where you would want to have Power Stones and soldiers operating simultaneously, because the soldier deck is very much an aggro deck. And in this situation, a 2/1 for 2 is just bad. It's just not good enough to cut the mustard when it comes to Constructed. In Limited, this is absolutely playable if you're in the Soldiers deck, totally. But in Constructed, I don't think this is going to be that great. It's not quite where you want to be. So, yeah, that's that. Next up, we have Curate. This is an instant for 1 and a blue. We last saw this card on Strixhaven. It now says Surveil 2, then draw a card. The reason I point that out, Surveil had not previously been a part of this card. It said, look at the top 2 cards of your library. You may put any number of them into your graveyard. Leave the rest on the top of your library in any order, and draw a card. So that is effectively Surveil, but they've changed it, so Surveil is now an evergreen mechanic. They have accepted the fact that Surveil is up there with Scry as an effect that they just want on cards. And let's be honest, they've been printing plenty of Surveil cards. So the fact that they finally call it what it is, after like 2 years of printing cards that functionally have Surveil on it, I appreciate that. The reason that's relevant is because there are older cards. So if you're in Explorer or Historic, I don't believe it's going to be good enough for Pioneer or Modern, but who knows? There is, there are a number of cards from Ravnica, I believe it was Ravnica Allegiance, that have Surveil payoffs. You have your Dimir Spybugs or your Thoughtbound Phantasms that actually get counters on them every time you Surveil. Disinformation Campaign is another great one. So these are cards that care whether or not you Surveil. Previously, Curate didn't trigger them. Now it does. Also, Consider now triggers those. It didn't before. So that kind of thing is pretty great. There might be an opportunity for one of those decks to really pop off. I don't know. As it stands for Standard, Curate is decent because it helps fill your graveyard. So if you care about graveyard synergies, Curate could actually be a very strong inclusion in a deck. However, I can't imagine a world in which I want Curate over Consider. Because if I want to make sure I'm filling my graveyard a lot, I could use cards like Otherworldly Gaze. That does a better job than Curate at just filling the yard, but it doesn't draw me a card. Meanwhile, Consider, it's just Surveil 1, then draw a card. So I can put the top card of my library into my graveyard and then either draw it or whatever's below it, and put 1 card in the yard. But it only costs 1 at instant speed. That's a significant difference. Curate costing 2 makes it just a little bit clunky. So I don't love it. There might be some control decks that could take advantage of it and make good use out of it, but I don't think it's quite good enough. Like, you really need to be caring about card draw, caring about your graveyard. Like, yeah, control is kind of the only type of deck I could see even maybe making a slot for it, but you got to be pretty hard up at the 2-drop slot, which you're probably not going to be, because there are a lot of great 2-drops. So I like it. Decent little card. Probably better in Limited than Constructed. All right, next up we have Defabricate. This is an instant for 1 and a blue. Choose 1. Counter target artifact or enchantment spell. If a spell is countered this way, exile it instead of putting it into its owner's graveyard. Or counter target activated or triggered ability. This card rules. I'm going to just I'm not just gonna say that and move on, but I do like this card a lot. Cards that have that ability to counter abilities, you know, the text that counter activated or triggered abilities are a big deal. This can prevent the Titan of Industry ETBs. This can prevent Portal of Portal to Phyrexia ETBs. Like, there are a lot of cards with ETB abilities or activated abilities on them that are really important. Also, this can counter Planeswalker abilities. Don't forget that. So if you have an opponent who's about to ultimate Liliana, they ult Liliana, boom, you just counter the activated ability. And especially if they had Liliana like right at 6, well, they just sacked their Planeswalker for no benefit, except for to have you discard one counterspell. That's pretty good. So I think that second ability is awesome. The fact that it hits that second ability is so strong is fantastic. On top of that, the first ability, being able to counter any artifact or enchantment spell, is huge. There are a ton of playable artifacts that are going to be hitting the battlefields now that Brothers War is here. However, well, it's not officially here on Arena just yet, but it will be very shortly. Maybe by the time you're watching this, it is. There are a lot of very good playable artifacts in Brothers War. You're going to want to be able to hit those. This also hits your Reckoner Bankbusters. It hits your Wedding Announcement. It hits your Fable and the Mirror Breaker. There are a ton of go-to staple cards in the format right now that this can counter for 2 mana. Only one of which is blue, so it's even splashable. If you're in like an Esper list or something like that, this can absolutely fit. And I love that. It's also a hard counter. There's no amount of mana they can pay to prevent this. Unless they have a counter of their own, this gets through. That's really cool. I like this card. I like this card a lot. It might be more of a sideboard card in certain like mid-range decks or like control decks, but I think it's very good. I think it's really solid. To be honest, I wouldn't be surprised. Like, it's flexible enough that I would probably consider running in some main decks, depending on how the meta shifts after Brothers War releases. But just great. All right, next up. Desynchronize. This is an instant for 4 and a blue. Target non-land permanent's owner puts it on the top or bottom of their library. Scry 2. This is limited removal at its finest. It is not uncommon for Wizards to print incredibly expensive removal with the understanding that it will only be playable in limited, and that is exactly what we have here. This is unplayable in standard. Playing 5 mana just to bounce something, even with the Scry 2, like, granted, you're bouncing it to the top or bottom, and you could theoretically target your own stuff if you want to put something on top for some reason. But there are better ways to do that in older formats, and in standard, there's no real payoff for that. So, like, I don't like this. I don't like this at all. All right, next up, we have Drafna, founder of Latnam. This is a 2/1 for 1 and a blue legendary creature, human artificer advisor. 1 and a blue, return target artifact you control to its owner's hand. 3, tap, copy target artifact spell you control. So the joke here is you have an artifact on board that has some kind of ETB effect. You then pay 2, bounce it back to your hand, then maybe that same turn if you have a ton of mana, or in the next turn, you cast the artifact back, pay 3, tap, copy it, and you get 2 copies. Cool idea. In theory, this could be very, very strong. I think in practice, it's not going to be that great, especially in standard. In Commander, this could be absolutely savage, frankly. Like, just straight up, this could be really freaking good. But in standard, I don't know that it does enough, and it's a little too squishy. A 2/1 doesn't survive. Like, it's just, this will not survive. There are a ton of cards that incidentally have the mode of dealing 1 damage to all your opponent's creatures. Yeah, this gets swept up in those all day. It dies to things like Path of Peril because it's a 2-drop, and Fatal Push if you're in, like, Explorer or Historic. So, this is an interesting card in, like, Commander or Brawl, but I don't see it making the cut in standard, just because, like, there isn't a good 4-drop, I don't know, there isn't like a Solemn Simulacrum or, you know, a good, like, Chupacabra style artifact where it, like, enters and kills something at, like, 4 mana. I mean, there's the Might Stone and the Weak Stone is a 5-drop that you could theoretically copy with this if you've got a ton of Power Stones lying around. It is legendary, but you would get 2 of the ETBs, so, like, maybe that's good. I don't know. It's fine. Like, this card is just fine. That's kind of the bottom line. Like, it's a cool idea. I'm probably going to try to build something around it, but it really needs a strong artifact ETB if this is going to stand a chance. A strong artifact ETB that's relatively cheap. Like, because there are some strong artifact ETBs that are awesome. Like, you know, you give me sorry, give me Portal of Phyrexia all day. But it's a 9-drop. Like, if I could get multiple Portals of Phyrexia down, that'd be incredible, but I would have to have 12 mana in order to do that. If we're going hard in the paint on Power Stones, that might work. Like, if we're doing the Karn Living Legacy and that kind of thing, then maybe we might be able to take advantage of Drafna and do something crazy like that. Fun idea. I like the thought, but I think it's a little janky. It's a little out there. Not that, don't get me wrong, I love jank. I do. But yeah, that's kind of my thought. Well, the other thing you can do, actually, now that I think about it, you could just use it to create copies of Mana Rocks as they come down. So in Commander, that could be fantastic. Where it's like, oh, I'm going to play my Mind Stone. I have 3 more mana lying around. Boop, I'm going to make another Mind Stone. So you just get 2 Mind Stones for effectively, for 1 card. Things like that could be useful. I can totally see that. Yeah, I don't know. This is a good one. This is an interesting design. It does something that you don't see very often. So I hope there's a way to use it. I hope there's a way to take advantage of it. The other thing you could do is use it to bounce. You can use it to bounce cards that have like prototypes or like double face cards, that kind of thing. So, and just like recast them for different modes. I don't know. Kind of neat. All right, next up. We have Falaji Archaeologist. This is a human scout, 0/3 for 1 and a blue. When the Falaji Archaeologist enters the battlefield, mill 3 cards. You may put a non-creature, non-land card from among the cards milled this way into your hand. If you don't, put a +1/+1 counter on Falaji Archaeologist. I like this card a lot. I like this card a lot because Reanimator strategies are sweet, and being able to fill your graveyard is a big deal and very, very important. So this puts 3 cards in your graveyard. One of the downsides about using mill as the way to fill your graveyard in a Reanimator strategy is you run the risk of milling your reanimation spells. So in this case, if you mill your Cruelty of Gix, or your No One Left Behind, or your Repair and Recharge, in this case, Falaji Archaeologist brings that card back to your hand. So you've now milled, you put 2 other cards into your graveyard, and you just drew a very a valuable card that's going to help you move forward. I think that's really good. And if you don't hit any of those, you get a 1/4 for 2. That is a modified creature. It's also a human and a scout. I don't know if the scout's particularly relevant, but it's a human, which is really good. I think as far as utility critters go, this is really good. Like, it's just rock solid. If you need to fill your graveyard in blue, this is great. And blue is actually, like, blue has a couple of like draw discard effects, and they have a couple of other mill creatures that are just bad. Like, self-mill in standard right now is not very good. But Falaji Archaeologist, I think, is a step in the right direction, and it's just pretty darn strong. I like this card a lot, actually. As of this recording, I actually just got done a couple hours ago playing in the early access, so thank you, Wizards, for that. It was an absolute delight. And one of the decks that I ran actually had Falaji Archaeologist in it, and it played really well. I was using Falaji Archaeologist as well as Rafine, and what I was able to do is the Archaeologist would mill. I usually got like a Repair and Recharge or like a No One Left Behind. I got a reanimation spell back, and sometimes put like my Portal of Phyrexia into the graveyard. By the way, we're going to cover all these cards later, but you can absolutely look them up. You can find them on Scryfall and the like. And a lot of the time what ended up happening was I would drop Archaeologist on 2, play out, it would mill some stuff. I would usually draw a card off it. Then I would drop Rafine on 3, attack with the Archaeologist, get a Connive on, discard something from my hand that I want in my graveyard. I draw an additional card, and then, and then by turn 5, I'm reanimating the huge monsters out of my graveyard very comfortably. And it was really strong. I think Esper Reanimator shells could actually be a thing in the future, and I wouldn't be surprised if this makes its way as a utility card in that list. Like, we're seeing Rafine's Informant get played a lot right now as that 2-drop discard a thing card, and I think this could fill a similar role. I don't know if it's quite as good, but it could be up there. All right, next up, we have Flow of Knowledge. This is an instant for 4 and a blue. Draw a card for each island you control, then discard 2 cards. If you are in mono blue, and if you care about card draw, this could be okay, I guess. That said, it doesn't say basic island. So if you build around this actually could be really strong. There are a number of card draw payoffs in standard right now. There is the new Teferi, which we're going to be talking about a little bit later, which, by the way, is phenomenal. There's the new Teferi. So yeah, spoiler warning on that. New Tef's good. But so there's him. He really likes card draw. Like, he likes card draw a lot, actually. Like, a lot. Like, it's not, like, yeah, anyway. Then there's also Shale Dread, the Apocalypse. Those are the 2 cards, and I don't feel like I need to explain how good Shale Dread is. If you've been playing standard at all, you've seen Shale Dread. She's a bomb. Whenever you draw a card, you gain 2 life. Whenever your opponents draw a card, they lose 2 life. So Teferi and Sheoldred, I think, are going to be part of a winning shell in the future. I don't know how meta it's going to be, but I think that could be a very powerful archetype and very powerful deck. If you are careful with how you build your deck, you could have triomes and tap lands that also happen to be islands. And so by the time you're casting Flow of Knowledge, you're drawing 5 cards off it, or 6 or 7 cards off it if it's like stupid late in the game. This could be a game ender on the spot in that kind of deck. Because if you get 6 or 7 off this, even having to discard 2, whatever, who cares? Like if you can draw 7 off this with a Sheoldred down or a Tef, like that's probably gonna ult Tef right away, and you've just gained 14 life. Like that's gonna be very difficult to come back from, and it's an instant. So it's pretty darn good. It's pretty darn good, but it's expensive, and you have to build around it. That's the thing. So 9 times out of 10, I would prefer Silver Scrutiny over Flow of Knowledge. Let me get that out there. Because Silver Scrutiny, it's just guaranteed if you pay 5, you draw 3, and you can do it at instant speed as long as X is 3 or less. And if you just need a gigantic draw a ton of cards haymaker in that style of deck, it can do that too, maybe not quite as big as Flow of Knowledge can, but it'll be big enough to win a game. So this is okay. As an uncommon card, in the right shell, it could be very, very powerful. But if you're putting this in your deck, be very careful of what dual lands you pick, because the pain lands do not count as islands. The slow lands from Midnight Hunt and Crimson Vow, they do not count as islands. Be aware of that. Be very, very careful of that. There are tap lands from Dominaria United that are the land types. Be aware of that. You can add those in if you really want to, if you need to go multiple colors. Otherwise, if you're just going straight blue, go after it. Like, yeah, this could do good work. All right, next up. Forging the Anchor. This is a sorcery for 2 and a blue. Look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal any number of artifact cards from among them and put the revealed cards into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Perfect situation. Perfect situation. You happen to have 5 artifacts locked and loaded on the top of your library. You pay 3, draw 5 cards. Drawing 5 cards for 3 is amazing. Like, nothing short of amazing. Even at sorcery speed, that's phenomenal. Although, you're not actually drawing them. Sorry. You're putting them into your hand. So you don't trigger Tef or Sheoldred with this. Be aware of that. That's actually a huge knock against it now that I think about it. But this is fine in an artifact-heavy deck. But that's what you need to have. You need to have an artifact-heavy deck in order for this to do anything. Because if it's just... I mean, if you rip this and you get 2 cards... you cast a bad divination. And it's not like you have selection either. Like, this isn't giving you card selection. Most cards like this, where it's like, look at the top X cards and then put a number of them into your hand, usually have some say over what you get. This doesn't give you that. It's only the artifacts. So you need to have a critical amount of artifacts in your deck in order for this to be good. That said, if you're in like Historic or Explorer, where there are artifact lands, all of a sudden this could become really strong. Because you could literally have a situation where, I don't know, 80%, 90% of your deck happen to be artifacts. You could have nothing but artifact creatures. You can have mostly artifact lands. You can like this and maybe like 1 or 2 other payoff spells might be your only non-artifact cards in the whole freaking thing. In which case, this could draw you a lot. But if you're not in that kind of a deck, I don't think this is where you want to be. Because remember, you have to have artifact cards. If you have a lot of situations where you pump out artifact tokens, this doesn't really help. Meanwhile, with other cards, the first one that comes to my mind, actually, is Reality Heist. So I want to call that out here because this is a great card that has been relegated to obscurity because no good artifact deck has bubbled up yet. Well, Brothers War is going to change that potentially. A lot of good artifacts are coming. So Reality Heist says it costs 1 less to cast for each artifact you control. That tokens count towards that. And then at instant speed for as little as 2, it costs 5 blue. Based on that first static, this could cost as little as blue. Look at the top 7 cards of your library. You may reveal up to 2 artifact cards from among them, put them into your hand, put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. I like Reality Heist a lot. It gives you a lot of good selection. It allows you to dig up what you need in a tough situation, as long as what you're looking for are artifacts. Well, Forging the Anchor is good, don't get me wrong. It is strong. But at the end of the day, it's, I don't know, it feels more limited. And the fact that it's a sorcery rather than instant is huge. If you use this, it's going to be very difficult to keep up counterspells removal. So I think that's actually ultimately the nail in the coffin for this. I think it would actually be quite strong if it were an instant, but at sorcery, I don't love it. All right, next up, Hurkyl, Master Wizard. This card is weird, and I want to love it, but I don't think I do. So, legendary creature, Human Wizard Advisor. Our advisor's getting some love. 1 blue. You get a 2/4 body. At the beginning of your end step, if you've cast a non-creature spell this turn, reveal the top 5 cards of your library. For each card type among non-creature spells you've cast this turn, you may put a card of that type from among the revealed cards into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. This is so weird. The idea is if you cast a sorcery on your turn, for example, and Hurkyl survives, keep that in mind. Hurkyl has to be there at the end step for this to trigger. If you cast a sorcery, you get to your end step, you look at the top 5 cards of your library. If there's a sorcery in it, boom, you get it in your hand. Cool. If you cast an instant, same deal. If you cast an enchantment, same deal. Cast an artifact, same deal. In a situation where you have a lot of enchantments or artifacts, this could be potentially strong because it gives you a card every turn if you're casting your stuff out. But it also gives you some concerns gives me some concern because if the spell happens to be a creature, like enchantment creatures or artifact creatures, they don't trigger this. So that's kind of a bummer. It's lacking some flexibility there. But additionally, you have to play on your turn. This only triggers on your end step. So in a control deck that is primarily playing on the opponent's turn, this doesn't do anything. Like this is a terrible fit for that style of deck, so don't even think about it. If you're curving out on your turn and you're casting non-creatures, this could be decent. The problem is right now, a lot of the decks that really focus on, being proactive on your own turn are usually doing so with creatures. It's kind of the nature of the beast, right? That's just how they do it. So there might be like an enchantment deck. I've actually done saga tribal decks in the past where it's just like nothing but sagas, and it turns out all your cards giving you like turn over turn value have a tendency to be pretty good. And if you have like Fable of the Mirrorbreaker and Kami War, you're gonna win games. Like, it's just that simple. Hurkyl in a deck like that actually could be really sick because it just helps you restock your hand constantly, because sagas don't count as creatures when they're coming in, even though half of them flip into creatures when you get there. So something like that is where I can see this card being okay, but it's only going to really draw you 1 card a turn. If you happen to like Fading Hope one of your opponent's creatures and play a saga, then this could draw you 2 cards potentially, but like only if they're the 2 right types of cards are in the top of the deck. So the deck building around it is very awkward, very limited. Like, I think this card reads like it should be really good, but at best it gives you 1 card with maybe a little selection at the end of your turn. That's really what you're looking at here. In like a late game situation where you like storm off in some weird combo deck, then it might work. Like, you might be able to get you more than that, but yeah, I don't think it's quite there. Interesting card, interesting idea. I think there are better ways to draw cards though that are more consistent. All right, anyway. Next up, we have Hurkyl's Final Meditation. This is an instant for 4 blue. As long as it's not your turn, the spell costs 3 more to cast. So if it's not your turn, this thing costs 7 blue. Return all non-land permanents to their owner's hand. End the turn. So Wizards has recently kind of stopped printing extra turn cards. That's not something that we see as often. I mean, we still have like Alchemist Gambit and that kind of stuff, but like extra turn cards are very difficult to come across, and they're usually not very good anymore since Elrond's Epiphany. I think they learned. However, end the turn cards, such as Hurkyl's Final Meditation, if you can cast them at instant speed, they're pretty much extra turn cards. If you have 10 mana at your disposal that can fall into this, so if you are ramping like crazy, so if you have crazy ramp, or you are able to control the board like a mother and just keep everything from resolving for your opponent to the point where you have 10 mana available, this says bounce all non-land permanents and take an extra turn for 10. Because what you do is you go to your opponent's upkeep. Don't even let them draw the card. Go to their upkeep, rip this immediately. They thought they were about to take a turn. Instead, they pick all their stuff up and you go again. That is incredible. That's stupid stupid powerful, and I absolutely love it. Now, the other thing you can do here, if your opponent is trying to cast something at instant speed on your end step that is going to be too strong for you to deal with, you can pay 7 and just end the turn. If your opponent has a crazy combat trick that's going to result in you getting blown out, pay 7, everything gets picked up, turns over. Now, in that case, your opponent gets to go first, so they get to be the first to rebuild, but still, it's pretty good. The other thing, when you are ending the turn at instant speed, any abilities or spells that are on the stack get countered. So keep that in mind. They get countered and removed, and that's it. They're gone. So if they have, like, if your opponent attempts to, like, I don't know, flash in, like, a Torrential Gearhulk, for example, when it's on the stack, before it even resolves, if you can hit Hurkyl's Final Meditation, then what happens is the, actually, wait a minute. No, it exiles. Then that Torrential Gearhulk is just exiled. It's just gone. And they still don't get, and they don't get the ETB effect, and then they have to pick the stuff up. So I think this card is actually very powerful. There are certain controlling decks that are going to be very happy to see this. I think the main benefit is if you can get to 10 mana. If you can ramp your way to 10 mana, this thing's awesome. Keep in mind, Power Stone mana cannot be used to play Hurkyl's Final Meditation. So that is a bit of a downside. You know, the strongest, most consistent ramp in this particular set that we're talking about does not help you get there. Mild bummer, but there are a lot of great ways to ramp your lands. So, and other traditional mana rocks still work. So, yeah, I like this. I like this card a lot. It's very strong. I'm probably going to try to do something around it. Also, just pointing out Torrential Gearhulk, because you could cast this with Torrential Gearhulk. That said, if you target this with a Torrential Gearhulk on your opponent's upkeep, you will still have to, I believe you will still have to cast pay 3 to cast it. And because that 3 is not considered part of its mana cost, it's an additional cost. And the Torrential Gearhulk removes the mana cost, but it does not remove additional costs. So keep that in mind. All right, next up. Involuntary Cooldown. This is a sorcery for 3 and a blue. Tap up to 2 target artifacts and or creatures. Put 2 stun counters on each of them. Cards like this that slow your opponent down are really only good if you're getting hyper aggressive. Because what this does is it takes 2 artifacts and creatures off the battlefield for 2 turns. Additionally, you only can cast it at sorcery speed. So what happens is you cast this, they tap, which if they were untapped already, great. If they're tapped down, cool. They go to their next turn, they remove the stun counter from both of them. Turn after that, they remove the stun counter from both of them. Turn after that, they untap. So it buys you 2 extra turns. And you take 2 creatures or artifacts off the table effectively for those 2 turns. In those 2 turns, you better be able to win the game. If you can't win the game in those 2 turns, this is not where you want to be. It's not very good. Yeah, I don't love this, to be honest. I don't think it's quite strong enough. At 4 mana sorcery speed, it just doesn't do enough. Now, situations where I could see this, if you have ways of recurring it, it could be pretty great because you can lock things down indefinitely that way. Also, notably, there is a card that we're going to be talking about a little bit later called Arcane Proxy that can recur cards out of your graveyard. If you cast it for its full value, you could hit this. So that's something. The other thing, actually, that would be really fun with this, though, I think bottom line, I think there are better ways to get stun counters. I think there are cheaper, more efficient ways to get stun counters on permanents. However, if you do have a stun counter on a permanent and you proliferate, if you're in an older format where you have like Karn's Bastion or the Merfolk Skydiver that proliferates, or Atraxa, just throwing that out there. So in Commander, like your Atraxa decks could use this because the moment stun counters show up, if you're proliferating, like if you can consistently proliferate on every one of your turns and a creature has a stun counter on it, it doesn't untap. Because you just put another stun counter on it, they go to their untap step, they remove 1 stun counter, you go again, put another counter on it, you get the drift. And this does give you that, so that could be fun. I don't know, it's a cool idea, but I think the card is just too expensive to get a temporary reprieve from 2 creatures. Also, it only taps them. If your opponent has a way to manually untap something, it can remove those stun counters, and if they can do that, like that makes this dramatically less impactful. So, anyway. All right, next up. Keeper of the Cadence. This is a 2/5 for 4 and a blue human wizard. Pay 3. Put target artifact, instant, or sorcery card from a graveyard on the bottom of its owner's library. I I would have to be doing something where I'm manipulating the bottom of my library to really care about this. The fact that it can't touch creatures is terrible. Like, not just like kind of bad. This is actively terrible. Best case scenario, your opponent has a flashback spell in their graveyard. You can pay 3 and effectively put it away by putting it on the bottom of their library. But then if they shuffle, they could potentially draw it again. So like, I don't like this. And it's just, bottom line, this is too expensive. Being able to hose graveyards is important, and this type of graveyard hoser that like sits on the battlefield, you can use it repeatedly at instant speed, and it tucks to the bottom of the library. Like, that's interesting, because we even have some cards, even in standard right now, Hurkyl Creeper comes to mind, that can pull cards out of exile. This can't do that. So, or they can't do that if you use Keeper of the Cadence to get rid of the thing. So, like, it's interesting, but at the end of the day, you need to spend 8 mana to get rid of 1 threat from a graveyard, and you're limited to artifacts and sister sorceries. So I don't like this. I just don't like this. Next up, we have colorless Rock. This is a 3/3 for 4 and a blue with flash and flying. When it enters the battlefield, create a tap Power Stone token. I don't love this, but at the same time, I don't hate it. It's also a bird. I like birds in general. I think I think bird tribal is a fun place to be, and also we do have a multicolor card in this set that cares about birds specifically and creates multiple copies of birds when you cast them. So synergizing with that could be fun. I don't know if it's good, but it could be fun. Also, this creates additional power stones if you blink it. So if you're doing any kind of ETB shenanigans, that could be pretty good. But it costs 5. I don't love that, and a 3/3 body is good. Like, a 3/3 body can make a big difference, but I don't know that it's enough. Also, a 3/3 flying body that comes out of nowhere is a big deal. That you could blow your opponent out in combat with this while ramping and putting a good body on board for the next turn. So this is one of those where if you can use kind of every part of the buffalo here, this actually could be really playable and really solid. If you have big, powerful artifacts that are going to cost you a lot of mana, or a lot of activated abilities where that Power Stone mana could be relevant, great. If you're going up against aggro decks, being able to like throw out a 3/3 at flash speed is also potentially great. And you got flyer. So I think this is fine. The fact that it's a common is really nice, because this definitely wouldn't be worth a rare slot by any means. It would have to cost 4 for that, I'd imagine. At 5, like, it's okay, but yeah, it's a little bit much, but you get a lot. So you get a lot for your value, you get a lot for the mana. There are probably better ways. Like, I don't know that this is going to make a cut for any deck that I think is going to be viable. Maybe a deck specifically built around that bird synergy that I was mentioning, which is Taunos, by the way, the toy maker. If you have Taunos, then colorless Rock could become valuable. It could, but the problem is Taunos is also 5-drop. So you got to ramp into it. You got to mean it. You got to be in a deck where mana is not that big of an issue to really get full value out of this. All right, next up, we have Latinam Adept. This is a 3/3 for 3 and a blue human wizard. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, put a +1/+1 counter on Latinam Adept. This looks like a great draft card. This looks like an absolutely great draft card. The truth of the matter is, the spirit token that Teferi Temporal Pilgrim makes is significantly better than this. And there's also like lore scale Quaddle in cards that are in formats, like older formats like Historian Explorer, that put a +1/+1 counter when you draw a card. Like, so I think like it's not just limited to the second each turn. I mean, that said, this could get out of hand. Like, this could get really, really big, but I think there are more efficient ways to do it. So I like the idea of benefiting from drawing additional cards in a turn, beyond just getting additional cards. Like, if you can synergize card draw into payoffs like this, then you're gonna reap the benefits in a really good way. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a mono blue deck that's capable of drawing a ton of cards that might want this as like a 2 of. Like, that could be decent, but at the 4-drop slot in the current standard, power creep is such that I don't think a card like this can actually hold up, which is unfortunate because it's a cool design. Yeah. All right, next up, Machine Over Matter. This is an instant for 1 and a blue. This spell costs 1 less to cast if you control an artifact creature. Return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. Excuse me. This is a quasi boomerang. I say quasi because boomerang can hit lands, but this is a quasi boomerang effect that can cost as little as 1. I like that a lot. Actually, I think this is really strong. Because for 2, Return target non-land permanent to his own hand is a very powerful effect. Very powerful effect. Gets rid of blockers. It gets rid of attackers that would kill you otherwise. So it can buy you time. It can break up combos. Like bouncing is very useful. And I mean, we saw like in older formats, you see Brazen Borrower all the time. Granted, that's a unique case because Brazen Borrower is also, you know, a creature that's incredibly valuable too. But, and adventures are their own thing. But it's a 2-mana return target non-land permanent. And in that case, it's even your opponent's control to their hand. In this case, you can even bounce your own stuff to protect it. That's pretty cool. And in a world where prototype is the thing, you could have a prototype down that's relatively inexpensive. And you know, you could pay an inexpensive prototype, but if it's late in the game and you have a bunch of mana, you can use this to potentially reset your prototype and cast it for its full value and get a much bigger body on board. That's neat. Yeah, I like this card a lot. Also with like channel abilities out there, like you know, you have cards like Touch the Spirit Realm that have channel abilities that are also permanents on the battlefield, like, or the permanent enchantment removals like Leyline Binding and that kind of thing. Like Machine Over Matter, I think actually is really strong. This gives you a ton of flexibility, and it can cost as little as 1. It's definitely best if you have artifact creatures. That's clearly where you want to be. But even if you don't, costing, you know, for 1 and a blue, that's still worth it. This effect is very good. So yeah, I like it. I like it in mid-range decks. I like it in like goofy combo decks. I think this thing has a chance. Yeah, I think the thing has a chance all over. All right, next up, Mightstone's Animation. This is an aura for 3 and a blue. Love the artwork on this thing, by the way. It says, enchant artifact. When Mightstone's Animation enters the battlefield, draw a card, like that. Enchanted artifact is a creature with base power and toughness 4/4 in addition to its other types. This kind of effect is cool. I'm glad this exists in Standard. I'm glad this exists in Standard because we have a lot of cool non-creature artifacts that now being able to turn them into creatures could be valuable. That said, I think there are better ways to do this. This suffers from the aura problem. Like, being able to cantrip when it enters is good, but to be honest, that's the only thing making me consider this card for even a second. Otherwise, this is like stone unplayable. Because if this didn't draw you a card when it entered, you'd be taking a permanent, turning it into a creature that makes it susceptible to creature removal, and then if your opponent destroys it, they remove it and this just because you like animated it. So I don't think this is quite great. There are other cards like Ensoul Artifact that does it significantly better, and the reason that Ensoul Artifact is so good is because it only costs 2, and you get a 5/5. So you can get, so in those kind of situations, you can throw like a 0-drop artifact or a 1-drop artifact, then Ensoul Artifact on 2 and be swing for 5 damage on turn 2. That's fantastic. Mightstone's Animation gives you nothing like that. It costs 4, and it creates a 4/4. It's just not good enough. The only situation I can see really leaning into this is if you are running board wipes. And non-creature artifacts. So, like, I don't know, wiping the board and having, I mean, I'm trying to think of even a good example. I don't know, if you wipe the board and you have like a Midnight Clock or something, being able to turn into a little 4/4 and punch, although Midnight Clock's not a good example. Celestis maybe, like, you know, being able to animate a Celestis might be valuable. I don't know, there's potential, I guess, but oh, actually, wait a minute. This could, well, no, again, it's not worth the slot. It's not worth the slot. But in Joda, if you're running Timeless Lotus, you could actually turn your Timeless Lotus into a 4/4 creature. Now, it is a legendary artifact. So if you have Joda, it would get the buff from all the legendary creatures you have, and it would then count towards the legendary creature rule, so it would help Anthem your team. So that's kind of interesting, but that's like a super fringe situation. And if I'm in the Joda deck and I already have Joda and a Timeless Lotus down, I would much rather drop a 4-drop legendary creature and cascade into something rather than play this. So I don't think this is where it's at, unfortunately. However, this next card, one with the Multiverse, enchantment, 6 blue. You may look at the top card of your library anytime. I like that. I like that ability right there on its face. That's already worth the price of admission. You may play lands and cast spells from the top of your library. Dope. And once during each of your turns, you may cast a spell from your hand or the top of your library without paying its mana cost. So if you are in a fight rigging style situation, or if you are in a situation where you can cheat this into play with like an Invoke Justice or something of that nature, this is going to be bananas. This card is basically Omniscience. It's basically Omniscience. So if you're playing this, you want to be playing it with a ton of huge spells. I mean, huge spells. Like, let's get big, let's get dumb. That is the name of the game. Because if you can, I mean, you drop this. The turn you drop this. So it costs, and actually it only costs 8. Like, 8's a lot, but for this effect, that's fantastic. Because it says once during each of your turns, you may cast a spell from your hand or top of your library without paying its mana cost. If you have another large spell, like Portal to Phyrexia, Titan of Industry, any of these monsters in your hand, the moment you drop one with the Multiverse, you can just play that other spell. So it refunds its mana value immediately if you have another spell in your hand that's worth it. And so if you're running, especially like with cards like Prototype, there are a lot of great Prototype cards that are cool, cheap, efficient creatures that also happen to have this top end of being these gigantic monsters. And one of the Multiverse lets you play them out as the gigantic monsters. I think this card slaps. Now, you need some way to get it onto the battlefield fast, or control the board long enough to get it down. But if you get this down, your opponent is hosed. Like, they are in a really, really tough spot. You have access to the top of your library, and you get 1 free spell a turn. Now, it's only on your turns. You don't get the spells on your opponent's turn, but this card's amazing. Your Invoke Justice decks, slot this in there. Even as like a one of, just like, the fun of, even if you don't have blue. But like, I can absolutely see a Jeskai Invoke Justice, like Reanimator style deck that includes this, that is just disgusting. Like, absolutely disgusting. And the top end on that deck is going to be absurd. So be aware of that. This is coming. And yeah, I'm definitely going to be building around it. All right, next up, we have Retrieval Agent. This is 3 and a blue for a 2/5 human soldier. Pay 2, Retrieval Agent gets +1/-1 until end of turn. Even in draft, this sucks. It's a bad body, and the downside of manipulating its power and toughness, you have to spend 2 mana. Like, why couldn't that just be straight +1/+1? Even then, it's still not playable. But the fact that it's +1/-1, it's like that Flowstone effect. This is terrible. Like, straight up terrible. I like trying to find, a place where a certain card might be able to work. This is like if you're in the limited soldier deck and you didn't realize you were in the soldier deck until like pack 3, and this shows up and you really just need another soldier, then I guess you take it, but yikes. As far as constructed goes, this is just unplayable. Not even worth a thought. All right, Scatter Ray. That's the next one. We got an instant for 1 and a blue. Common. Counter target artifact or creature spell unless its controller pays 4. Soft counters in constructed make me sad. I don't generally like them because once you get into the late game, they become almost ineffective. Like, almost, I say. That said, there's already cards like Make Disappear, which it's counter anything unless the controller pays 2. So they either have it or they don't. In this case, they're not going to have it most of the time. Like, this is going to counter a lot. And the fact that it's artifacts or creature is relevant. So I can see a situation where this sees play, actually. If the new meta coming out of Brothers War in Standard involves as many artifacts as I suspect it will, I think there are a lot of artifact creatures that are going to find their way into decks. If that's the case, then this, well, if it's an artifact creature, then whatever. But like, if you're on the play, this could counter Reckoner Bankbuster pretty consistently without consuming a Make Disappear slot, which could then hit the Rafine next turn or whatever. Like, that's pretty decent. Now, the fact that this doesn't touch enchantments means it cannot hit Wedding Announcement. Make Disappear can. Cannot hit Fable the Mirror Breaker. Make Disappear can. Also, Negate is in the format and can hit all of those. Meanwhile, Negate can't hit creatures. Well, this can't hit creatures. Oh, no, this Negate can hit creatures. Creatures and artifacts. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. If artifacts are the predominant support card type, at least in a deck, then this could see some sideboard play. If that's not the case, then I don't see this being... I don't know. I don't see it being relevant. Yeah, this looks like a sideboard card to me. Yeah, this looks like a sideboard card because like it's almost negate, but not quite. It's not negate at all. Sorry, it's almost Essence Scatter, but not quite. And Essence Scatter is actually not bad. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, 4's a lot. 4's asking your opponent to pay a lot. I suspect this is more limited than constructed. But yeah, sideboard at best. All right, next up we have Sky Strike Officer. This is a 2/3 for 2 and a blue human soldier with flying. Whenever Sky Strike Officer attacks, create a 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature token. Tap 3 untap soldiers you control, draw a card. In a dedicated soldier deck, this is interesting The main downside in that situation is that you don't want to leave 3 untapped soldiers just chilling, so you're not really going to get to take advantage of the draw card very often. The other situation where I can see this is in a token-based strategy where you want to be able to take advantage of tokens in one way or another, even if that's sacrificing them for value. Because at the end of the day, even if you never use that last ability, this is just creating a 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature every single turn. If you can do something with that, this is probably pretty good. Like, it's actually not bad. And on top of that, if you use this twice, you can tap it and the other 2 soldiers to draw cards if you need to. So if your opponent stabilizes and you don't have any good attacks anymore, turn it into a card draw engine. Like, that's actually pretty cool. I think this card's actually really good. And the fact that it's a 2/3 flyer for 3, it fits a number of, there's a lot. That said, the 3-drop slot is pretty heavily contested. If you're in a mid-range multicolored deck, which I suspect a lot of us will be in Standard, because prior to Brothers War, that was kind of the thing. It's everywhere. Like Esper, Grixis, or Jund midrange is kind of the hotness. And I don't expect that to change. I expect some of those lists to shift a bit, but I don't expect the general like composition of Standard to change too dramatically, because those mid-range decks are just so good. However, and as a result, you have at your 3-drop slot, you have Wedding Announcement, you have Rafine, you have Fable the Mirror Breaker. Those are tough to compete with. They just are. And any situation where you want Sky Strike Officer, you'd probably rather have Wedding Announcement in that slot. That is just what it is. Unless you have a more aggressive bent, then maybe this is the answer. The other option is if you do end up with a soldier-specific deck, because if you have the Valiant Veteran that gives all your soldiers +1/+1, this is all of a sudden creating 2/2s each turn. That's valuable. Like that's good. So I don't know. It's interesting. This actually might be decent in like a Grixis variant of the Rakdos Sacrifice decks that we see right now with Oni Cult Anvil. Actually, I like that idea. So you could run like Oni Cult Anvil, Sky Strike Officer, and then like Blade Coil Servant, which is another one that we'll talk about when we get to the multicolor cards. That is just good Grixis value. So I can see value in that because you create an artifact token each turn that you can like sacrifice to do stuff. I don't know. There's something there maybe. I think this card is actually just pretty decent. On its face, it just reads really well. So I'd be surprised if it doesn't find a home somewhere. All right, next up, Splitting the Power Stone. Sorcery for 2 and a blue. As an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice an artifact. Well, we were just talking about stuff we can sacrifice a second ago. Create 2 tap Power Stone tokens. If the sacrificed artifact was legendary, draw a card. The only time I am considering playing this is if I have some kind of artifact that I want to sacrifice, that I want to die. If I don't have that, this is like not even close. Like, get it the hell out of here. I don't see this making any headway anywhere. Like, this looks like it's trying to be a Power Stone variation on Deadly Dispute, and it is just crapping the bed hard. Because, like, what do you want to do? Like, Power Stones are one of the cool modes, and one of the cool benefits that Power Stones give you is the ability to sacrifice them for value. Like, they are artifacts that are they have some use, but you can just sacrifice them for value. So one of the things you could do is like, well, you can sacrifice the Power Stone to Splitting the Power Stone, but what's the benefit? You get another Power Stone. 1 Power Stone is not worth 2 and a blue. It's just not. It never will be. That's a terrible rate. I think this card is actually straight trash. Like, I don't see any situation where I want to play this card. If New Phyrexia comes out and there is a 1-drop legendary artifact that like draws 2 cards when it goes to the graveyard or something, but it's indestructible. Like, if there's something like that synergizes with this, sure, but like I don't see that happening. I'd be shocked. So yeah, no, this card sucks. All right, next up. Stern Lesson. Instant for 2 and a blue. Draw 2 cards, then discard a card. Create a tap Power Stone token. That's actually not bad. It's very straightforward, and the fact that it's an instant makes it playable. So if Power Stones are relevant, if you're ramping to big artifacts or abilities that you need to be able to cast significantly or consistently, this gives you that. I mean, in blue, this is blue ramp in addition to card draw. It also triggers card draw twice. So if you have like a Shale Dread or Teferi situation going on, it's triggering card draw. You also discard 1 card, so it's putting a card into your graveyard. And you create the Power Stone. So I usually like draw 2, discard for 3 is not great. I think this actually isn't bad. Now, I was saying earlier, it is a 3-drop. So the situation where I would want to play this is if, well, one, if I can take advantage of the Power Stones. I need to have some reason to be playing the Power Stones. But if I am playing the Power Stones, and I'm in a deck that has a lot of instant speed interaction, a lot of instant speed kill spells or instant speed counter spells, this is actually looking pretty good. Because what it does, it gives you options. So if you hold up a counter spell on turn 3, your opponent chooses to go, maybe they sniff out the counter spell so they don't play anything. They go to their end step. You can then cast this, massage your hand a little bit, maybe draw into some more answers that you might need later, put something relatively meaningful in the graveyard, hopefully, and then you also get the Power Stone token that you can use. And so all of a sudden, on turn 4, if you have a 5-drop artifact, you can hit it, which is pretty cool. Like, I don't know. Actually, I think this is decent. Like, I think it's decent. It's a playable utility card in blue, if you're in like a blue flash instant speed kind of situation. Yeah, good stuff. All right, next up, Take Flight. This is an enchantment aura for 3 and a blue. Enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +1/+0 and has flying. And whenever this creature attacks, draw a card. All right, I was bemoaning auras previously. And to be fair, I still kind of bemoan auras. I think they're not great. However, I see value here. Ivy, Gleeful Spell Thief, is a card that says whenever you target another card that you control, whenever a creature you control becomes the target of a spell, you can copy that spell and target Ivy. So if you cast Take Flight on one of your other creatures, then Ivy gets a copy. So you'd be drawing 2 cards upon attack, so you attack with both of them. Also, Light Pause is out there. Light Pause is a card that, frankly, is not very good because it really relies on auras. Well, all of a sudden, if you can synergize Light Pause with Take Flight, that can be pretty powerful and has the opportunity to draw you a lot of cards. So those are the situations where I can see this card being relevant. And the other thing I really like about it is you draw the card on attack. You draw the card on attack, not on combat damage. So that's pretty sweet. Yeah, I think in a Light Pause deck, this is where you want Take Flight. I think that's really the key, because like with Light Pause down, you could cast Take Flight, and then Light Pause triggers, and you go get Access Tunnel. And so now all of a sudden, Light Pause has higher power. It connives upon damage, and if it attacks alone, it can't be blocked. Like, that's pretty savage, and I like it. I like things that are savage. What can I say? Yeah, so I think Take Flight in a Light Pause deck is actually not bad. Outside of that, it's probably not good enough. Like, +1/+0 and flying is not a lot for a 4-mana aura. Like, it's asking a lot. The fact that you draw a card every attack, like, if you need to be able to attack multiple times for this to be good. If you can't get 2 attacks with your creature, this was a waste of a card slot. If you can get at least 2 attacks, though, now we're talking. That's actually pretty solid. So, Ivy and Light Pause, and possibly both at the same time. Bant, Ivy, Light Pause. Let's make it happen. Anyway. She doesn't need to be Bant. Not necessarily. We could go straight to Zorius with that. Anyway. No, green has a lot of good auras. Anyway, that's the story for another day. Oh, here we go. The main event. The big dog himself. Yeah. Teferi. Temporal Pilgrim. This card is incredible. Full stop. This card is great. Legendary Planeswalker. 4 starting loyalty, 3 blue. Whenever you draw a card, put a loyalty counter on Teferi Temporal Pilgrim. 0. Draw a card. And let's be honest, that's a +1. It ends up adding 1 loyalty because you draw a card. And then -2, create a 2/2 blue spirit creature token with vigilance, and whenever you draw a card, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. -12. Target opponent chooses a permanent they control and return it to its owner's hand. Then they shuffle each non-land permanent they control into its owner's library. So what you do here is you run a ton of card draw effects. Tons of card draw. And I think what a lot of people will do with this is they'll try to stick to Teferi and then like Silver Scrutiny and there was the blue spell earlier that draws cards based on the number of islands and like Flow of Ideas, I think it is. And there are a lot of draw tons of card type spells. You also have recurring card draw like Reckoner Bankbuster that's just lying around being awesome. Wedding Announcement can draw you a couple cards too. Fable the Mirror Breaker triggers this on chapter 2. Like, there's a lot of stuff that makes Teferi Temporal Pilgrim very, very good and can tick it up super fast. And as a direct result, that negative 12 is going to happen with relative frequency. However, Teferi is so good, you don't even need to get there. What I do, but like, so again, I played early access earlier today, and I did jam a little bit with Teferi, and I was shocked at how effective this card was. Because what I did every time, I downticked and created that blue spirit. So now your opponent has 2 threats that they have to answer, because the deck I was playing, and the deck you should probably be playing alongside Teferi, has a ton of extra card draw effects. So you're drawing a ton of cards. Well, if they get rid of Teferi, all right, sure. Like, obviously I want him to stick around. He's a powerful card. But that spirit token gets huge, fast. And the fact that it has vigilance means it can be attacking and blocking simultaneously. Well, not simultaneously, that's not how combat works, but you get what I'm saying. You attack on one turn, you can block the next. It's fantastic. That creature becomes a very, very big challenge for your opponent to deal with immediately. And on top of that, you can downtick Tef once, make that critter. Go to your next turn. You draw a card for turn, Tef upticks to 3. You can downtick him again and then cast a card draw spell. Buff both spirits and Tef back to like a decent rate. Like, I think this card is gonna see a ton of play. I think that downtick is really where the rubber meets the road, and a lot of crazy stuff is gonna happen. The 0 is good, don't get me wrong. 0 is great. We've seen with other cards like Lolth, for example, the Spider Queen, we've seen a passive ability that's just draw a card. Or not passive, just a plus that's just, or a 0 even, that's just draw a card, is really freaking good. And that's going to be the case here too. If you can protect Tef, if you get 2 turns with Teferi Temporal Pilgrim and they don't remove it, they're probably dead. Like, that's how good this card is. It's fantastic. Yeah, I was playing, the deck I was playing was an Azorius Control deck. I was playing full-on Azorius Control, which if you've watched any of my streams, twitch.tv/Hammox42, that is not my bag. Control is absolutely not, where I want to be most of the time. But at the same time, it felt really good, because with a lot of control decks, if you're relying on 7 or 8 drops, or if you're relying on like hard casting Shark Typhoons to like take over value, you get to a point where you stabilize the board and then it still takes you like 2 or 3 turns to win. With Temporal Pilgrim, that spirit is providing so much pressure so fast that like by the time you're getting to like turn 7 or 8, like their life total is relatively low, and you're continuing to beat them down, and you have a dominant board presence in addition to having stopped everything they're doing. Like, it's really good. I guess that's the definition of mid-range. Maybe it's not control at all. But yeah, no, Tef's legit. This card's great. It's great. Play it. Also, just throwing it out there, Rafine into Sheoldred into Teferi. Do with that what you will. All right, next up. Third Path Savant. 2/3 for 2 and a blue, human wizard, pay 7, draw 2 cards. I kind of like this. It's not great. This is like, in draft, this is actually really solid, because especially in a format where Power Stones are going to be running rampant. I don't know the Brothers War draft format very well, so I can't tell you whether or not this is too slow for that environment. But a 2/3 for 3 is okay in blue. Like, you can do worse. It's not great by any stretch, but it can block reasonably. It's a relevant body that your opponent has to work around. But just having divination on an activated ability is rad. Power Stone mana can go into that, so that's pretty cool. Like, a 7's a lot, but 2 cards is a lot. So as far as a common goes, I kind of like this. Like, I kind of like this a lot, actually. Also in EDH. In EDH, if you're in a situation where, like, this actually is probably going to be a really good budget EDH card, because it's a common. It's a common 3-drop. And if you're in like a wizard tribal situation, or if you're in any kind of ramp scenario, where you have a deck capable of producing a lot of mana, this is a great way to capitalize on that. Because actually, if you have a way of generating infinite mana, Third Path Savant puts your whole deck in your hand. Like, that's pretty cool. Like that. So as a result, like, this is an EDH combo deck's dream. Because if you can, once you generate infinite mana, you just need a way to get access to your cards. There's stuff like Future Sight and Tassiger, the Golden Fang for those colors that can do this, like something similar. But Third Pass Savant, it does it all and it's just blue. I like it. Yeah, it's simple, it's janky, but I think it's got potential. I like it. Next up, Thopter Mechanic. This is a 2/1 for 1 and a blue human artificer. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, put a +1/+1 counter on Thopter Mechanic. And then when Thopter Mechanic dies, create a 1/1 colorless Thopter creature token with flying. We were looking at a 4-drop earlier that had that same passive ability. This is infinitely better. The fact that it's a 2-drop means if you have any kind of way to draw additional cards, this is going to get fairly large. And on top of that, when it dies, you do get a Thopter. Like it straight up replaces itself on the battlefield with a flying 1/1. Sweet. Like this actually looks really good. Yeah, in limited, this is going to be a pain in the butt. A lot of people are going to have a tough time dealing with this. If you're in constructed, this could be a decent payoff in decks that care about card draw. And let's be honest, we like between Connive and various cantrips and the like, drawing a ton of extra cards in a turn is not that hard to do these days. So yeah, I think this card's actually really solid. It's just good. Yeah. Interesting. I want to put this in the same deck as like Academy Loremaster. Academy Loremaster was a card that came out in Dominaria. It's the 2/3 for 2. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, they can draw a card. If they do, their spells cost 2 more during their turn. Thopter Mechanic's pretty great because at the top of your upkeep, it's like, I would like to draw an additional card. Oh, hey, my mechanic just got bigger. Like, that's pretty cool. I like it. Anyway, yeah, good stuff. All right, next up, we have Urza, Power Stone Prodigy. Now, the brothers themselves, Urza and Mishra, have gotten a number of treatments in this set, which is appropriate. They're the titular brothers, after all. And this is the uncommon Urza. It is a 1/3 for 2 and a blue with Vigilance. Pay 1 tap, draw a card, then discard a card. Let's go. That's what we're looking for. And then whenever you discard 1 or more artifact cards, create a tap Power Stone token. This ability triggers only once each turn. So this draws you additional cards. So it helps put counters on the mechanic that we were just looking at. It helps you get stuff into your graveyard. It triggers your Teferis and things like that. And it creates the Power Stones. If you like Power Stones for one reason or another, great. Like, yeah, so if you're in a situation, you need to discard artifacts to get the Power Stones, but I think it's worth it. The fact that it's a 1/3 for 3 is kind of a bummer. I want it to be bigger. I really wish Urza was a 2/3 instead of a 1/3. Or I wish it cost 2. One or the other. I feel like it costs just a little bit too much for the effect, but it's a cool effect. This is a good utility card, and the fact that it's vigilant means that if you buff it, we use any effects to help its power and toughness grow, then all of a sudden you have a really good creature in combat because you can attack, then block, and still use the activated ability. Like, anytime you can do all of that, you're in pretty good shape. So, I like Urza. I think it's a cool card. I think this actually has a lot of potential. Like I said, it's a little bit pricey, but we also have a lot of things that synergize with 3-drops in this set that can synergize with Urza here. So, it's not bad. It's a good little utility card. Next up, we have Urza's Command. This is an instant for 2 blue. Choose 2. Creatures you don't control get -1/-0 until end of turn. Create a tap Power Stone token. Create a tap 0/0 colorless construct artifact creature token where this creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact you control. Scry 1, then draw a card. This card is interesting. It has phenomenal artwork. I love the artwork. And you know when I'm talking about beautiful artwork as the first impression that I get of a card, it's mechanically not great. And that's the case with this one. I don't think this card's particularly good. The fact that it's an instant means that there are some decks that might be able to use it as like a 2 of. And it does scry 1 and draw a card, so it does opt to replace itself in hand. So that's fine. But what are the other modes you're getting? You know, creatures you don't control with -2/-0, like that can help mitigate some damage against like a go wide aggro deck. So it might buy you a turn, which to be fair, sometimes exactly what you need. It also can create that construct token, which if you have a lot of artifacts lying around, then all of a sudden that thing could get fairly large. But you need to have a lot of artifacts lying around for this to be that good. And I don't know how often you're going to want to do that. I think if you create a tap Power Stone token and then opt for 4 mana, you just got screwed. Like you got played. That is like that's just not worth it. Not by a long shot. So if you don't have a ton of artifacts, like if you're playing in a controlling deck that also generates a ton of artifacts, then maybe this is okay, because it helps you keep your mana open and it gives you that construct that you can theoretically drop on your opponent at instant speed, maybe as a blocker. Which, I mean, the potential for blowouts are here, but it's very narrow. Yeah, it's very narrow. I don't think this is very good. It only draws one card. If it drew two, like if there was no scry and it just said draw two cards as that one mode, then this would be great, frankly. But as it stands, I don't like this card. I just don't. All right, next up, Urza's Rebuff. This is an instant for 1 blue. Choose one, counter target spell, or tap up to 2 target creatures. I actually like this card a lot. Now, they're in every single set that Wizards has made in recent memory, they have had an instant 1 blue counter target spell plus something. Like, there's usually some kind of value, maybe a cost reduction stipulation, or maybe it sends the thing to exile, or maybe it has a set mechanic, a second mode, something. Like, there's usually some little bonus, some little perk to it, in addition to just being a counter spell for 3. Like, Cancel's a classic card, and this is the cancel of the set. Like, every set gets one. And Urza's Rebuff is the one for the set. I like it because a lot of cancel variants aren't very good if your opponent's going aggro. It's not great. Because they're casting small creatures, you really don't want to spend 3 mana to counter like a 1 or 2 drop. Like that's not a good exchange, you know? Like, depending on what it is. Obviously, there are situations where that's great, but like on its face, you don't want to be doing that. However, this one, the ability to tap 2 target creatures is actually really relevant. Unearth is a mechanic in this set where you can pull a creature out of your graveyard, it gains haste, and then at the end of the turn you exile it. That's actually really awesome here, because if you tap that creature before it attacks, your opponent got no value for unearthing it. And there are a couple of unearth creatures that actually have attacks triggers, where the whole idea is you unearth it and swing. Like, that's the way you make the thing work. This completely stops that. That's really cool. Also, if your opponent's just going stupid aggro and the counterspell isn't very worthwhile, you can tap their 2 biggest creatures in 1 turn to prevent them from attacking, mitigate some damage. So it helps prevent damage, even if it's not countering a spell. So, all in all, I like it. I think it's a good value card. If you're in a situation where you want to be playing a cancel of some kind, where you want to be playing a 3-drop counterspell, this isn't bad. Next up, Weakstone's Subjugation. This is an aura for 1 blue. Enchant artifact or creature. When Weakstone's Subjugation enters the battlefield, you may pay 3. If you do, tap enchant a permanent. Enchant a permanent doesn't untap during its controller's untap step. I don't like this style of removal. You really need to take advantage of artifacts, or not, enchantment. You need to take advantage of enchantment synergies if this is going to be good. Because, like, pinning something down like this, preventing it from untapping, it can get completely undone by a manual untap effect. So something like a shore up just completely prevents this. Like, well, even if it does get in under a shore up, your opponent can cast shore up to untap the creature. So there's that. Additionally, there are plenty of creatures that have activated abilities or passive abilities that are relevant to the game that they don't care if they're tapped or not. Like, if you pay 4 for a Weakstone Subjugation and you pin down a Sheoldred, your opponent's going to shrug because they're still getting Sheoldred pings. Like, yeah, it's a 4/5 body that's now off the table. That is relevant, to be sure, but it's just not enough. Like, it's just not enough. I like the idea of having this, like, quasi-kicker where it only costs 1, but if you wanted to tap something, it costs 4. Like, that's kind of cool, but this is limited removal at best. And to be honest, I just don't like these. I don't like these enchantments. I don't think they're very good. Oh, and the opponent can still sacrifice the body for value if they can't. Like, if it's not good tapped, like if you hit like a Champion of New Benalia or something that like really wants to be attacking and this does stop it from doing the thing, then your opponent can still sacrifice you for value, which I don't like it. All right, next up, Wing Commando. 2/2 for 2 and a blue, human soldier with flying and prowess. Ooh, now we're talking. I actually like this guy a lot. I think it's like, it's a 3-drop. So, like, that's like, it's relatively expensive, but in like a budget build, I would say this is a budget build kind of situation, because the kind of decks that would like Wing Commando are spell singers, decks that are casting a lot of spells repeatedly, because that prowess has an opportunity to get Wing Commando freaking huge. The the problem with that I see is a lot of those same decks at the 3-drop slot would probably rather have Haughty Djinn, because Haughty Djinn is just significantly better. Cost reduction and, power equal to the number of spells in your graveyard. Yeah, I think it's just infinitely better. Now, I'm comparing a rare to a common. That's not really fair. But to Wing Commando's credit, I find myself comparing a rare to a common. So that's pretty good. If you're in like a pauper format or an artisan format where you're limited to either commons, or where you're either limited to just commons or commons and uncommons, Wing Commando could actually be an excellent piece, because what it does is it gives you a body that's capable of ending the game by becoming very, very large throughout the course of the game just by casting spells. So if you're casting Fading Hopes, if you're casting Play with Fires, if you're casting Lightning Strikes, then this thing is just gonna grow. So if you're in like an artisan, spell slinger, Is It deck, for example, and you have this and like Monastery Swiftspear, you can just like stuff can get gnarly. So I like it. I think it's a cool card. Yeah, it's definitely better for budget. I don't think it's great in like, in big, big constructed, but in budget builds, this could be really good. All right, next up, Zephyr Sentinel. This is a 2/1 flash flying human soldier for 1 and a blue. When Zephyr Sentinel enters the battlefield, return up to one other target creature you control to its owner's hand. If it was a soldier, put a +1/+1 counter on Zephyr Sentinel. So this clearly wants to be soldier tribal. It is a soldier style combat trick, which is actually pretty cool. If you are attacking with, say, a 3/3, your opponent blocks it with like a 2/2 and then hits their 2/2 with a combat trick of some kind, like Gaia's Might or whatever. All of a sudden, you're in a situation where you no longer have an advantageous attack. Or say, in response to your attack, they cast a Wandering Emperor and try to exile one of your attackers. Zephyr Sentinel can come down for 2, save that creature, bounce it back to your hand, and now you have a 3/2 flyer on the board that you spent 2 for. That's actually rad. Like, I think this card is shockingly good, just as a go-to combat trick. The other thing I want to do with this is ninjas, because what you can do now, you don't get the benefit of the +1/+1 counters, but still, what you do is you attack with your team, do your ninjutsu action, then you can cast Zephyr Sentinel, bounce one of your ninjas back to hand, and you have a 2/1 flyer on board that can then attack the next turn and become your that you can use to activate your ninjutsu effect. I actually think it's pretty strong. I think this card is actually really solid. As a protection trick, it's really neat. And like in soldiers, you do get an added bonus. And like I said, in ninjas, I think it could work too. I don't know exactly what to put around it, but I think it's strong. I think this card's really strong. All right, next up, we have Arcane Proxy. Going into preview season, like if I had filmed this video a week ago, I would have said this card sucks. I would say it's not worth it, not very good. It's a crappy Snapcaster Mage. Blinking, it's not even worth that much because you get a 4/3. Like, that's it. That's all you get. So, anyway, my tune's changed a little bit. Arcane Proxy is an artifact creature wizard. It's a 4/3 for 7, or you can prototype it as a 2/1 for 1 blue. When Arcane Proxy enters the battlefield, if you cast it, exile target instant or sorcery card with mana value less than or equal to Arcane Proxy's power from your graveyard. Copy that card. You may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. There are a lot of pretty good, inexpensive spells running around out there. And Arcane Proxy can grab any of them. It can grab an Impulse. It can grab, a Fading Hope. It can grab Go for the Throat. It can grab Infernal Grasp. Like, there's a lot. It can grab, Lightning Strike, for example. Like, if you're in an Is It Spellslinger action, it can grab Burn Spells. Like, I think it's actually pretty good. Being able to, like, freely Snapcaster something out of your graveyard could be really solid. And in all reality, casting it for its full price is probably not going to happen very often. Like, the 4/3 for 7 is really bad. It's really bad. I would rather run any kind of like regrowth effect or anything like that. That said, one janky application for Arcane Proxy is kind of cool. It checks the power upon entering the battlefield. It checks the power on entering the battlefield because the ability goes on the stack. The ability goes on the stack after it has entered the battlefield. And you have to select a target based on Arcane Proxy's power. If you have Anthem effects, if you have like a King Darian down, if you have a Wedding Announcement flipped, if you have, in the trenches. If you and like, I wouldn't play in the trenches, but if you were to, it would, you know, Arcane Proxy would combo with it to the point where if you hit like if you have 2 anthems or some kind of buff effects, you're now looking at a 6/5 coming into the battlefield for 7, and you can free cast a 6-drop instant or sorcery out of your graveyard. That could be big time. There's a lot of stuff you can counter, or a lot of stuff you can hit with that. I say counter. You can't actually use this to counter stuff, which is a mad bummer. Like that definitely sucks, because unless you can flash it in. Now there is an artifact. There's a colorless artifact in this set that does give all of your artifacts flash. That could be phenomenal with Arcane Proxy, because if you can flash this in, all of a sudden you can be hitting negates and essence scatters out of your graveyard with an Arcane Proxy coming in. And if your opponent doesn't give you anything worth countering, then you can grab an impulse or whatever. So I think it's actually pretty good. Like, I think this card is actually really solid. You know, with prototypes, I want to blink them, I want to bounce them, I want to do that kind of stuff. And this guy doesn't really lend itself to that very well, but all the same, casting stuff out of your graveyard is good, man. And casting cards that were never intended to be cast out of your graveyard from your graveyard is the best. Like, flashback cards are usually priced appropriately for them being able to flashback. A lot of cards you're designed to only get once, and this lets you double dip, and it's pretty good. It's very good. All right, next up. We have Coastal Bulwark. This is an artifact creature wall, 1/3 for 2 with Defender. It gets +2/+0 as long as you control an island. So if you are in blue, if you have an island, this is a 3/3 Defender for 2. And you can pay 2, tap, surveil 1. This is a fine role player. If you absolutely, totally need to buy time for one reason or another, this does the job. Also, we have a lot of wall synergies that came out of Dominator United. Wingmantle Chaplain, for example, if you're doing Wingmantle Chaplain things, Bulwark can actually fit in that really nicely. Because you get a 3/3 Defender for 2. And you can even surveil with it. So you can help, it can help fill your graveyard if you care about that, or help you dig into your, whatever you need, whether you need additional lands or whether you need to find your combo pieces, whatever they may be. I think this card's decent. I don't think it's great. You know, Defender's a real knock against it. Like, having Defender is rough. Like, but in a dedicated Defender deck, it's actually pretty good. Dominator United saw a ton of Defender cards, but they all had pretty crappy stats. Like, usually one of the benefits with Defenders is that they have big butts. They have a high toughness. In this case, and Coastal Bulwark is actually pretty good on stats for its size, for its mana cost. But in Dominator United, there were a lot of like 2/1s for 1, or like with Defenders, like what? Or like a little 1 toughness or 2 toughness walls, where it's like, these walls are super brittle. Like, why are these walls so brittle? Wingmantle Chaplain turned out to be a phenomenal payoff for all of the walls, so it ended up being worth it in draft. I've tried doing it in Constructed, and it kind of sucks for that reason. The walls all die way too easy. But Coastal Bulwark might change that. It might fit into that deck and give you a little bit of beef to actually block early. Like, think about it. We're in a situation where creating a wall deck that's good at blocking is tough. What? That was the only thing it used to be able to do. Anyway. But yeah, Coastal Bulwark's fine. It's not bad. It's a little common. Next up, we have Combat Courier. This is a 1/1 construct for 1. Pay 2, sacrifice Combat Courier, draw a card. It's great. This is a nice little, this is kind of a throwback to like Bomat Courier. It kind of gives me that vibe. I also love the fact, like, looking at the artwork, it almost looks like Skittering Surveyor a little bit. Like, the creature looks very similar to Skittering Surveyor, except it has like an infantry officer like helmet on, which is kind of cute and funny. And it, like, I can appreciate the kind of the tongue-in-cheek nature of it here. Let me yeah, so Skittering Surveyor is a classic card. It was in the most recent Dominaria set. It's a telescope with legs. And so here, Combat Courier, we have a telescope with legs that has a helmet. I'll take it. I like it. In any event, the card is decent. It's a 1-drop artifact for 1. It's a construct. If you care about artifact creatures, it's great. If you have sacrifice synergies, being able to pay 2 and sack itself is actually pretty great. It also puts you in a situation where if your opponent tries to remove it for any reasons, if you've like buffed it to become a reasonable threat, you can just pay 2, sack it, and draw a card. It also unearths itself, which is pretty great. It unearths for 1 blue, which is why we're talking about it here in the blue set review. So it can come back, which is nice. And then once it's back, if you have 2 additional mana, you can sacrifice it and draw a card. So you could draw 2 cards off this pretty comfortably, which is nice. Like, it's not amazing, but it's nice. And if you have an Oni Cult Anvil down, if you're in like a Grixis, like Oni Cult situation, you have an Oni Cult Anvil down, you sacrifice the combat courier, you draw a card, and then you also create that little 1/1 construct from the Anvil. So if you have synergies where this is popping off, it could be pretty good. It's just a solid little role player. I like it. It's a 1-drop. Good 1-drops are tough to find, and yeah. And it's a good colorless 1-drop at that. Even better. All right, next up, we have Depth Charge Colossus. This is a 9/9 for 9 colorless common. Depth Charge Colossus does not untap during your untap step. You can pay 3 and untap Depth Charge Colossus. It also has Prototype, 6/6 for 4 blue. So this is just a big chungus. The whole idea is you just get a fatty out. That's it. It's big. Even its prototype mode, a 6/6 for 6, is freaking big. The problem is the downside. It not untapping during your untap step really bites. Like, it's just a bummer, man. I want my stuff to untap. That's what the untap step is for, right? Being able to pay 3 and untap it at will could be meaningful. Because that also, like, being able to untap it at will for 3, when you first read it, you're like, oh, so I have to pay 3 each turn to untap it. And while, yes, that is part of the deal, if you do want to untap it during your turn, you do have to pay the 3 for it. However, if you attack with it, you can untap it in your post-combat main. You can actually attack it after, you can untap it after attacks. So while this effect is not great, it actually does give it quasi-vigilance, which is pretty cool. And the reason I say it's pretty cool right now specifically is because the Wandering Emperor is still running around everywhere. If your opponent throws a Wandering Emperor and tries to hit Depth Charge Colossus with it, just pay 3 and untap it. The Emperor ability checks if it has a valid target prior to resolution. It doesn't, because Depth Charge Colossus is no longer tapped. So it wouldn't work. The spell would fizzle, or the effect would fizzle. They wouldn't get the 2 life. And Depth Charge Colossus is still tapped and attacking, still attacking, not tapped, duh. But it's still attacking, still getting in for damage, and it survives. So that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's a 6/6 with pseudo vigilance that you have to pay for. But I'm not mad at that. The other thing is, if you want to keep up counter mana, like, you can keep up your mana. You don't have to dump it into this right away. Like, you can keep up counter spells, you can keep up interaction, and then on your opponent's end step, you can untap it. Or it's kind of fun, if you have 3 mana open, your opponent kind of can't attack into this. So this card's not good. Like, I don't love it, but the more I look at it, the more I find little intricacies and little ways to take advantage of it that are kind of fun. So, I don't know, it's interesting. I like it. Also, if you can give it any kind of tap ability, if you can, like, use an aura or equipment to give it a tap ability, that could be fun. So all in all, I think it's decent. Like, maybe not amazing, but rock solid. Next up, we have Hulking Metamorph. This is a card I can't wait to crack open, actually. This is an artifact creature shapeshifter, 7/7 for 9. You may have Hulking Metamorph enter the battlefield as a copy of an artifact or creature you control, except it's an artifact creature in addition to its other types, and its power and toughness are equal to Hulking Metamorph's power and toughness. And you can prototype it as a 3/3 for 2 blue. So I talked about, like, how every set has a cancel. It seems like every set these days has a clone too. There's a 4-drop clone in, like, every set in blue. And most of the time they're not great, to be honest. They usually are pretty bad. Because, like, they can't copy legendaries, and they, you know, a lot of times they'll have, like, some downside. Being able to only copy stuff you control really sucks. Like, the best ones can copy creatures or artifacts from either side of the board. The fact that this can copy an artifact is meaningful. Most of the time it's just creatures. So the fact that it can target any artifact you control is pretty rad. It's worth noting the name changes. So if you copy a Celestis with this, Hulking Metamorph is going to come into play as a Celestis. And as a result, the legendary rule will fire unless you have a mirror box down. So be aware of that. That's a thing. But if you have a Portal to Phyrexia down, and Hulking Metamorph enters the battlefield as a copy of Portal to Phyrexia, you're doing the thing. There are actually a lot of really big, really powerful artifacts in the set that this can all of a sudden take advantage of in really cool ways. There's there is a there's a creature. There's a prototype creature in green that it has tap, add green mana equal to its power. But if you prototype it for 3, it only comes in as like a 1/3, so you only get 1 mana for it. Hulking Metamorph can copy it, and all of a sudden you have a 3-drop that can tap for 3 green. Like, that's an instance of a way to just ramp to the moon. And that's just one example. There's a lot of stuff you can do with this card. I think there is a combo waiting to happen with this that is going to be absolutely backbreaking, and I'm not exactly sure what it is yet, but I'm going to experiment, and I'm going to find it. All right? Portal of Phyrexia is the first one that comes to mind. Portal of Phyrexia is a massive artifact. It is a 9-drop that I am, like, first thing I did when I got my hands on the early access was a Reanimator deck with Portal of Phyrexia. I think Hulking Metamorph could fit in that, because if we get multiple portals to Phyrexia, upon each ETB, your opponent has to sacrifice 3 creatures, and on your upkeep, you then get to reanimate something every single turn. That could be insane. Like, absolutely, like, actively insane. So, I'm hopeful. Hulking Metamorph is just good stuff. All right, next up, Spotter Thopter. This is a 4/5 for 8, flying. When it enters the battlefield, scry X, where X is its power, and you can prototype it as a 2/3 for 4. Scry is good. Scry is underrated. I don't know if Scry's this good. A 2/3 flyer for 4 is not very good value. 2/3 flyer for 4, Scry 2, still not very good. It's not doing the thing. Now, if you can cast this out as a 2/3 for 4, Scry 2, great, and then blink it with like a Touch the Spirit Realm or a Planar Incision, and then all of a sudden, this comes into play as a 4/5, or in the case of Planar Incision, comes in as a 5/6 with flying. That then lets you scry 5 or 6, 4 or 5. That's great. Like, that all of a sudden becomes very, very good. So if you're doing the prototype blink shenanigans, this actually is a really cool utility piece in that deck specifically. So I think that's decent. But like an 8-drop, 4 or 5, I mean, this is designed so that you play it for the prototype. Like, you have to play it out for the prototype. You're not hardcasting this for 8. Like, and if you are hardcasting this for 8, like, you're missing out, because there's a lot you can do with 8 mana that's way better than this. That said, Power Stone mana can help with it, so it might be easier to get to than it looks, but still, yeah. Interesting card. Like I said, I think the prototype blink deck, if you're doing a full-on blink deck, this could be good. Otherwise, nah. All right, next up, Surge Engine. This is a 3/2 defender for 2. And this card is cracked. I was talking earlier about defenders being a thing. If defenders are a thing, you want this card. If defenders are not a thing and you're in blue, you probably still want this card. This thing's fantastic. 3/2 for 2 with defender. You can pay 1 blue, Surge Engine loses defender, and gains this creature can't be blocked. So if you're doing the Wingmantle Chaplain thing, the moment you activate this, this no longer counts towards the number of birds you have, but you have a 3/2 unblockable, you probably don't care. So there's that. But if you're doing anything else, this all of a sudden you have an unblockable 3/2 that can be swinging on turn 3. That's actually really good. Like, your opponent has to answer this. Note, though, it is a 3/2, meaning it is within cutdown range until you activate this. 2 and a blue. Surge Engine becomes blue and has base power and toughness 5/4. Activate only if Surge Engine doesn't have defender. So that's a great way to buff it up. And then you can pay 4 blue, draw 3 cards. Only if Surge Engine is blue, and only once. Now, you'll notice it doesn't say once till end of turn, or once this turn. It's only once throughout the course of the entire game. But still, you have an ability at some point to drop 6 mana into this and draw 3 cards. That is a lot. 6 mana is a lot, but 3 cards is a lot. So yeah, I think this is just a generically good card. Like, usually with these like kind of level up style cards like Surge Engine, Evolved Sleeper, Ascended Spirit before them, we usually see them in like tempo style decks. Although Evolved Sleeper is a bit of a unique case too. Ascended Spirit was like pure tempo. That was like mono blue tempo was the deck that wanted that card, and like no other deck could really use it. In the case of Surge Engine, I think this is good enough to see play just about anywhere, to be honest. If you're running blue, like a blue mid-range situation, or a blue tempo situation, this is exactly what you want. Because it's a 3/2, you pay, like, so on turn 3, you pay 1 blue into it, you still have 2 mana up for counter spells and whatnot, and you start attacking with a 3/2. If you want to keep a 3 mana counter up, you just don't attack with it the first turn. That's fine. Like, you know, anyway, it's very good. I think this card is really solid. So obviously it fits the tempo shell perfectly. It replaces that Ascended Spirit roll just like a glove. But like I said, it's an unblockable 3/2. If you have a situation where you want to be dealing combat damage to your opponent for any reason, if you have like, you know, saboteur style effects where you're drawing cards when you're hitting your opponent, this is going to do the job really nicely. If you have ninjas, like I was saying earlier, you could ninja with this. It's a little expensive for a ninja enabler, but that's the thing. I don't know. It's just really good. Also, Rafine. If you're conniving when you attack, Surge Engine is a great place to dump the counters because it's unblockable. Yeah, and anything that bluffs, any buff, like this thing's just gonna get through. Yeah, unblockable is a big deal. All right, next up, we have the Temporal Anchor. This is a legendary artifact 3, blue, blue, blue. At the beginning of your upkeep, scry 2. Whenever you choose to put one or more cards on the bottom of your library when scrying, exile that many cards from the bottom of your library. During your turn, you may play land or play cards exiled with the Temporal Anchor. I like the idea of this card. I like the idea of this card very, very much. However, I don't think it's going to be very effective. I just don't. I don't think this is gonna do good work. It is legendary, so you can't have multiples, so you can't have redundancy. Additionally, if your opponent interacts with it at all the cards that were exiled under it are gone. That sucks. Additionally, if I'm scrying, like it's my buddy Hollywood Pizza, great YouTuber and Twitch streamer, and tournament organizer. Oh my goodness, he's the freaking best. If you're not currently following Hollywood Pizza, definitely go do so. He and I actually did a podcast where we did a set review where we looked over a number of these cards, and this was one of them. And he put it just perfectly. If I'm scrying cards to the bottom, it's because I don't want them. And this says no, you get them anyway. So what it's kind of encouraging you to do is just scry everything to the bottom. Like whenever you scry, just put it on bottom, and you just kind of draw it anyway. But you can only play them on your turn. So if you have a counter spell at the top, you're gonna want to just leave it there. You'd rather have that in hand. But otherwise, yeah, just put it on the bottom. But like, if your opponent interacts with it at all, the cards are gone. Even if you cast out another Temporal Anchor later, it only recognizes the cards that unique permanent exiled. To the point where if you blink it, the new Temporal Anchor that enters is considered a brand new permanent, so it doesn't see the old cards. So they're all gone. They're gone forever. So the real benefit here is scry 2 at the beginning of your upkeep. Like that's it. And it's like, and it like almost draws you 2 cards a turn. Almost. So I could be wrong on this, but I'm not sold. I think 3 blue, blue, blue is a very steep cost. It just is. It is expensive. It is difficult to pull off. If you're in like a mono blue devotion thing and like Explorer, maybe. Like we're using like Caliphate, the Devoted of the Sea, I think it is. Like whose power is equal to your devotion to blue. Like that kind of thing could be fun, but like because you get the 3 blue devotion. But it's a 6-drop to effectively draw 2 additional cards a turn with some caveats. Like, it's fine. I don't know. I'm interested. I'm probably gonna try it, but I don't think it's great. Like, I wouldn't craft this day one. You know, it's one of those. If you're on Arena. All right, next up. This is actually the last one that we have for the day. Teresian Mindbreaker. This is a 6/4 artifact creature Juggernaut for 7. I'm the Juggernaut, bitch. That's right, I said it. Whenever Teresian Mindbreaker attacks, defending player mills half their library rounded up, and it unearths for 1 blue, blue, blue. This is an effect we've seen before. This was actually an effect that was kind of originally brought into the game as I understand it. There might be an older one that I'm not aware of, but the earliest one I was aware of was Fleet Swallower. Fleet Swallower is an interesting card. It has this exact same effect, but it's like a 7-drop, and I think it's a 5/5. So it's a cool effect. It is. And this is a strictly better one, actually. Let me double check that. So Fleet Swallower, let's take a look at this thing. Yeah, oh, it's a 6/6. 6/6 for 7. When it attacks, target player puts the top half of their library rounded up under their graveyard. Yeah, before mill was keyworded. But yeah, so this is the same effect, same card, effectively, except in this case, you get a slightly worse body in a 6/4 instead of a 6/6, but it's 7 generic mana instead of 2 blue. But it also unearths for 1 blue, blue, blue. So it can unearth for 4. So if you mill this thing, you can unearth it, swing in, mill half your opponent's library, get it for 6 damage, and then it pieces out. The way that this style of effect is useful is when you combine it with Bruvak, the Grandiloquent. That is where it's at. That's where this really sings. Because in a mill strategy, milling a big chunk of your opponent's library feels great. The problem is, if it's this late in the game that you're actually hitting this, if you've been milling with your other cards, they probably don't have much of a library left. And the fact that it rounds up means you're not really hitting that much with these hits. So your best bet is to do a combo shot. And the one combo that you may have heard of is Brewvector Grandiloquent. If an opponent would mill one or more cards, they mill twice that many cards instead. So when you double half, you get one whole. And so that just says target opponent mills their library. They mill everything out. And it does work. I've seen it work. It's very powerful. And I think Mindbreaker makes that effect more consistent. Because at the very least, they can run multiple copies of it. There's Fleet Swallower as the example. There's also Lord Xander from Streets of New Capenna has the same ability, in addition to some other stuff going on with that card specifically. But yeah, I think Mindbreaker's fine. If that's the effect you're looking for, it's actually really solid. I think in most decks, I really don't like this. I don't think this card is very powerful. 6/4 for 7 is not great. Like it's too fragile. It's too easy to deal with, and unless you combo it with like Brewvec, who's historic legal by the way on Arena, but not Explorer or he was a Jumpstart card, so it's not legal in Explorer or Standard. So those are the formats where you're really not going to see. I don't think you're going to see Mindbreaker at all. The idea is cool. There's something here. It would be interesting actually to create, like with the Metamorph, maybe making multiple copies of Mindbreaker and attacking with all of them simultaneously. They trigger independently, but still you would end up. So they trigger independently, so you will never get a full mill kill shot with it. But at the same time, like you could mill out a large portion of your opponent's library. Like if they got 40 cards left, one of these gets them down to 20. Two of them get them down to 10. 3 of them get them down to 5. You know, they give you an idea. So, like, if you have other mill strategies that can actually deliver the final blow, then this actually could be a good way to whittle them down, which could be fun. I don't know if it's good, but it could be fun. Like, Ruin Crab, this is not. This is, you know, it's not a dedicated, like, tried and true mill engine. This looks more like a combo piece to me, which I'm cool with. In any event, thank you so much for checking out the video. I appreciate it very, very much. Next up, we're going to be doing Black, so keep an eye out for that review. I will do my best to get that out tomorrow as you're watching this, assuming you watch it upon release date. And yeah, I appreciate it very, very much. I'm going to be doing all of these for Brothers War, and please let me know if you enjoy this type of video. If you want to see me do more full-on like set reviews. I'm long-winded. It's part of the deal. I like talking about Magic cards, and I like breaking down individual cards. It's what I do. It's kind of my favorite thing. If you're interested in that, or you have feedback on what kind of formats you'd like me to do that in, please let me know. I want to make sure that I'm creating the kind of content that you want to see. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much, and I'll catch you on the next one.